All right, we're back.
Okay, so just to recap, we talked about income, pillar number 1. Pillar number 2 is your credit and your debts. Now today we're going to talk about pillar number 3, which is your assets. And assets, we can categorize it as any liquid funds. And so as far as the bank is concerned, liquid funds includes obviously your savings, your checkings, even your 401k, any investments, even life insurance policies that have cash value. Those would be considered liquid assets. Now, the reason why liquid assets are important is for 3 reasons we need assets. So number 1 is going to be down payment. Obviously, if you're doing VA zero down or a USDA loan, you don't need a down payment. But for most loans, you need a down payment, like FHA is 3.5%. Conventional loans, typically about minimum 5%, sometimes as low as 3%. For jumbo loans, 10%, but typically about 20%. So, most loan programs need down payment. So that's number 1 reason. That's the first reason. Second reason why the banks want to review the assets is for cash to close or closing costs. Now, closing costs is a general term of all the third-party fees like title insurance, appraisal, escrow services, things like that. We lump them into one big concept called closing costs. And here in Hawaii, and every market's going to be different, but here in Hawaii, it's going to run about 1 to 2% of the purchase price. And the banks want to make sure that you have the funds for closing costs. And then the third reason, which is a sometimes kind of a reason, is for reserves. So depending on the loan program, depending on your situation, the bank might need to document reserves. And reserves meaning how many months of the mortgage payment can you pay, or how much money do you have in your savings account that you can put towards the mortgage payment in case you lose your job, or in case you lose, a source of income or whatever it is. So those are the 3 main reasons. Again, that's down payment, closing costs, and reserves.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Yeah. I mean, and that's the biggest fear I think a lot of us talked out of it is I don't have enough money saved. And you don't have to have that much necessarily.
Yeah. And even for the down payment or closing costs, there are a lot of programs out there like down payment assistance programs. And also there's other strategies that depending on how creative your loan officer can be, that, they can, bring to the table a few different creative strategies that can help you. And there's a particular strategy that we've been, very successful with. And that's utilizing seller credit.
Mm-hmm. Game changer. I mean, it's literally like, it seems like free money. It's not free money, but it's a way to get creative with how we use money.
Yeah. And for the viewers that don't know what seller credit is, what is seller credit?
Yeah. So it's a way to negotiate some money back from the seller early from your transaction. So hypothetically, I always say, like, let's say a property is listed for $500,000 and we're going to offer $525,000. And first thing is like, why would we offer more? Don't we want like a lower price? Not necessarily, because we can ask for that seller to give us $25,000 back in terms of seller credit. And that just gives us so much flexibility to say, hey, I've got 25 grand to go kind of shopping in a sense where we can decide where to disperse those funds. So yes, your loan is still going to be $525,000, but the seller only keeps the 500. Mm-hmm. So we have 25 grand to play with. So what are some of the things we can do with that?
Yeah. So seller credit, some of the things we can do is obviously cover closing costs. We can also buy your interest rate down. We can also utilize it towards a temporary buy down, which temporarily for the first 2 or 3 years lowers your monthly payment even more. So those are some of the creative things that we can do. The way that I like to explain seller credit is that it's like an instant rebate that we negotiate upfront from the seller. Kind of like if you can imagine going to a supermarket. I don't know if people do this these days, but if you go to a supermarket and you buy a pack of gum for, let's say, $1, then you can tell the cashier, if you're using a debit card, that, hey, I want $100 cash back. Then they'll charge you $101, and then you get the $100 bill or 520s or whatever it is. You get $100 back, right? So it's kind of like that. Again, it's an instant rebate that we negotiate upfront from the seller. Then we can utilize it in some creative stuff. So, utilizing that, a lot of, like, for example, our VA clients who do zero down, a lot of the times we are able to successfully create the financing so that it's literally a zero out of pocket transaction, not just a zero down loan. Yeah.
Like you put your initial deposit in, but we can get that refunded to you at closing. So you just buy with a signature. Correct. But going back to reserves, I think, like I said, it's a little scary. You're like, oh, do I need to have 25,000 in the bank? Like, what's the magic number the bank's looking for? would you say like 2 to 3 months of income is what they're looking for, or housing payment?
They're looking for the housing payment. So let's say the mortgage is $3,000 a month, including taxes, insurance, and the HOA. Then let's say they're looking for 6 months of reserves, that would be 18,000. Yeah. So that's that they want to see that you have access to it somewhere. It doesn't have to be liquid. Like for example, if you have 18,000 in your 401k, you don't have to go and liquidate it. They just want to see it that it's there. Now, sometimes the banks don't need the reserves, but it's always still a good idea. And some of the things that when we advise our clients, we tell them that be prepared for a rainy day fund. Because I think one of the things that, maybe many realtors or lenders might not talk about is what happens after you buy the home, right? Now you're a homeowner. Now there's going to be different things that you might want to upgrade, things that you need to repair, and that's going to be all on you. So, we want to make sure that you're not completely tapped out when you come and sign the paperwork with the notary, and that you still have a good, healthy rainy day fund. For that, I would say, 3 to 6 months at least of your monthly expenses in a savings account or, in some sort of vehicle that allows you to earn interest.
And I would say if you're not there yet, that's okay. Give yourself a year and you'll be so surprised how fast you can save when you really drill down on it. I want to jump back to seller credit real quick though, because there is a caveat. It's not always easy. It's not always a said and done. Like, yes, I'm going to submit this offer and they're going to agree. There's two things that are kind of the catch. One, the seller has to agree with it, first of all. For some owners, it's a big word and they're like, oh, I don't know what that is, so just no. And like, there's a lot of behind the scenes communications that I'm doing as the agent and Brian's doing as the lender to say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, hey, like listing agent, this is why it works so well. But for some owners, it's just so foreign that they're like, oh no, I don't even want to deal with that. And so we have to get over that burden. Second one is appraisal, right? So talk to us about appraisal a little bit.
Yeah, sure. And just to the first point, a lot of the times seller credit, people have in their mind, oh, it's something that I request for when it's during the home inspection period and it's for repairs, right? Yeah. And you request for seller credit, or, you want something changed or whatever it is, that's when you request. So it's more of a reactive tool than a proactive tool, but we're using it in a proactive way. Yeah. Now, the second point that Marina just brought up, the appraisal. So in the world of lending, we can only lend on the sales price or the appraised value, whichever is lower. So again, I'm going to repeat that: the sales price or the appraisal value, whichever is lower. Okay. Now, so if the appraisal comes in low, or we say the appraisal coming in short, then we got to restructure and figure out how to navigate that. And so, one of the things I always do in the very, very beginning, in the first few conversations that I have with clients is, okay, here's the worst case scenario. Let's address the elephant in the room. And let's come up with a plan B, C, and D, and just have that in our back pocket, put our best foot forward, make the offer as strong as possible.
Absolutely. And I would just say, like, don't think that 25 grand is even a lot. Sometimes we've gotten away with getting $50,000 in seller credit. And so the sky's the limit as long as it's going to appraise at the value. And so that's our job too, is to do some fact finding, look at the neighborhood comps. Hey, is this thing actually going to get appraised here? We can't just shoot for the moon. It has to make sense. But it's a tool that we love using, and it's found our clients a lot of success that way.
One quick story. So I had a client, they were a VA client, purchasing right around a $1.3 million price range. We successfully negotiated $87,500 in seller credit to cover their closing costs, buy their interest rate down, and then also have that 2-1 buy down. So, their effective interest rate their first year was like a 3%.
Wow.
So that was really amazing, and, made them super happy, right? And the appraisal came back actually higher than our contract price or sales price. So, it was more than supportive of the seller credits and all that stuff. So it was really, really awesome. Now, not every situation, not every transaction or offer is going to be like that. So, that's where, we do a lot of meticulous research. We identify different data points, and then we bring together, analytically, with that offer strategy. So that's, it's not just some arbitrary number that we just throw out.
Yeah. And just a reminder, when we're reviewing these properties and we're showing and stuff, once we find your top two, we're crunching this all up front. It's not like a surprise after we get accepted offer what your payment's going to be or anything. Like, we're pretty much nailing it down before we even submit the offer. So you can really sleep at night and okay, this is what I'm expected to pay. This is what the future is going to look like. And just give you guys peace of mind. So was there anything else on this topic?
A couple of things. So one thing is a lot of people say, oh, I just have cash stashed away. There are a lot of laws regarding anti-money laundering. And so in real estate transactions, cash is not king. So you definitely want to, if you have like 5, 10, 15,000, like in a shoebox somewhere in your closet, go and deposit that into a savings account or a checking account ASAP. There needs to be some time, and it's called seasoning, that it needs to sit in the bank before it's considered usable funds. So, make sure that, you don't have any cash lying around. And also
Gifted funds?
Gifted funds, yeah, that's a really great topic actually, and I'm actually happy that you brought that up, because a lot of the times for first-time home buyers, let me back up. I will have to say the hardest thing, even for myself, is to save money. It is the hardest thing, especially if we live in a place like Hawaii where cost of living is high. It's even more difficult. And so what a lot of first-time home buyers utilize is the help of family members, and family members can help in the form of gift funds. So gift funds are a gift from a family member, relative, and that can be put towards the down payment, closing costs, buy downs, things like that. It can just help the buyers with the transaction, making sure that they have enough funds to close. So that's definitely an option. And the one thing that I hear a lot of the times, especially for first-time home buyers, is that, hey, I want to do this on my own. And it's kind of a, they want to be, it's pride. They want to be proud of it. And definitely, kudos, to those who can, but it's okay to, be humble sometimes and, ask your auntie or uncle, mom, dad to help you, because this is going to put you, it's just going to help you level up, in terms of your financial portfolio. And there's no shame in asking for help. One kind of pro tip that I want to share, is utilizing your 401k creatively, or it's, it's kind of a well-known thing, but some people might not know about it. So I want to share a little bit, a pro tip on how to use your 401k. So there are two ways that you can take money out of your 401k. One is called a withdrawal. And when you do a withdrawal, that money that you take out, let's say you take out 10,000, then that 10,000 is considered income. And therefore you have to pay income tax on it. And obviously it depends on your state, for the state income taxes, but for federal for sure. And on top of that, if you're taking money out for any other purpose than buying your primary residence, then there is a 10% penalty for early withdrawals as well. Now, if you're buying your primary residence, the IRS does waive that, so you don't have to worry about it, but it is that income tax that, however many thousand that you have to pay extra. Now that's one way of withdrawing funds. The second way of withdrawing funds is through a vehicle called a 401k loan. And what that is that you're borrowing against the funds that you have in your 401k account. And typically it's 50,000 or 50% of the vested value, whichever is less, okay? And there is interest that is attached to that loan. And for TSPs, like government 401ks, they're like 3 or 4%. For private 401ks, like if your employer has, a Charles Schwab or whatever it is, it can be about 8, 9, or 10%. But I don't want you to be afraid of that, because that interest goes straight back into your 401k account. So the concept is that you're borrowing from your retired self and you're paying your retired self back with interest, okay? Yeah. So of all the places that you could borrow money from, the first place that I always suggest you to look at is your retired future self and see if you can borrow from yourself.
Sure. That's a good tip. I didn't know that. Yeah. Okay.